Hello and welcome to Masterclass number 24. My name's Morag Gamble of the Permaculture Education Institute. So for the last couple of years, I've been running these free permaculture masterclasses every month and been joined by thousands of people each time. And I'm absolutely delighted that you're here with us tonight. I'd like to begin though by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting with you today, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to welcome all of you. I'd like to welcome those too who are here as part of the Permaculture Educators Program. And if this is the first time that you've been here, let me just give you a little bit of an overview. So you can actually open up the chat on the side and start to ask questions as we're going along. And I'm also going to be posting in there some links as well to some other references that might be useful to you. And it'd be great now if you could start to put in where you're from, introduce yourself a little bit. That would be wonderful. And I also need to acknowledge too that we are living in extremely strange times now, and that many of you may be struggling. And so I hope that this will be of some value to you. And I also want to let you know too that the last masterclass, number 23, is now available up on my YouTube channel. And that has a lot of very practical information about kitchen gardening and how you can get rapid gardens happening. And since I saw you at masterclass number 23, I've done 55 short films about how to grow food really simply. And this has been in direct response to the COVID-19 crisis, when there was the massive seed run out and all the stores had run out of their seeds and their seedlings. So talking about how you can grow food from things you can buy in the store, from the seeds, from the vegetables, and also how you can easily take cuttings from different plants if you've got friends or neighbours who had some. So there's a huge resource there now on the YouTube channel that I do encourage you to go and have a look at if you're looking for some really practical information. And also tomorrow I'm running a free gardening workshop that's live streaming via the Brisbane City Council website, but I'll give you some more information about that later. So just to give you a little bit of background, these masterclasses, they're always sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute. And so the Permaculture Education Institute runs a Permaculture Educators Program, which is a combination of a permaculture design course and teacher's course. And we also run a program called Our Permaculture Life, which is essentially has a blog with 400 different articles there, a YouTube with well over 150 films, and also an incredible edible garden online course. And we run the Ethos Foundation, which is a permaculture charity, and I'll let you know a little bit more about that too as we move on. So again, thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoy this session. So everything is changing and we're all affected globally, but it's not really equal in the way that people are being affected. Those who are already in vulnerable situations are being affected the most, and there's a major crisis that's unfolding as we speak. And I think we're also getting to the point of realizing that there is no quick snapback from this, that we need to be able to find ways to bounce forward and move forward that embraces a more regenerative way. So at the moment, we're kind of in a bit of a fluid state still. You know, the layers have been peeled off. We've seen some cracks in our system, and we're really at this point of trying to make sense of what's happening and where we can go. Just the other day, I was listening to Fritjof Capra reflecting on the impact that the pandemic is having on the world today. And one of the things that he said, which is really important, I think, is that we know now that the world is able to respond to existential threat with an urgency and coherence once political will has been aroused. And this is interesting because we've been calling for change for a very long time, and even recently with climate change. And yet, even though the science is being put forward and we hear that it's, 10 to 12 years, that we really must pay very close attention, still the existential threat doesn't seem to be quite as urgent as in the now. that COVID has really brought us into. So the interesting question too is that whether we will have the collective wisdom and political will to learn the lessons and to apply this to the climate crisis once we start to move out of the COVID crisis. What we know is that the coronavirus lockdowns are causing food shortages. We're having a situation where the seasonal workers aren't able to be out there helping on farms. There's problems with distribution of food across borders. There's hoarding of food, not just by individuals, but by countries too. And in some places, access to seed is really challenging. And so with all of these things combined and the fragility of the food system set up as it is, based very much on the global trade of food and just-in-time systems, that what we're hearing is that if the virus doesn't kill, hunger will. And what the UN World Food Program has said just recently is that 265 million people could be pushed to starvation by the end of 2020. So that's 1 in 30 people in the world. And so we are in a crisis, and a humanitarian crisis is unfolding as we speak that is rippling out from the coronavirus. So what now? I had been asking the question, what next? But actually I think we need to be asking this question. What is it that we need to be doing now that is going to carry us forward in a way that addresses our global crises and the humanitarian crises that's unfolding? We need a revolution, not a violent one, not one about vanquishing the enemy, but one where we're actually being called to evolve humanity altogether in a healthy direction. We need to become regenerative cultural pioneers. So how do we evolve towards regenerative living? Well, the best place to start is in the garden. Starting locally in our communities, making a difference where people can immediately actually see the difference and be able to make an impact for their family and their community. And so this process of myceliating, I love this term. My friend introduced me to it recently. So it's actually about all of us everywhere making a difference where we can in our own places and connecting up globally. So it's not just lots of little isolated gardens, it's not just about the garden itself. It's about the garden becoming the place in which we regenerate the soils, we regenerate the water systems, we rethink our food systems, we rethink our economic systems, we think differently about how we're educating through eco-literacy and a connection again to nature. It's about finding a sense of peace and resilience in our own places. And what more than that do we need right now, particularly in places where hunger and poverty is on the rise rapidly? So what happens when a caterpillar changes to a butterfly? This process of metamorphosizing. And when we use these examples from nature, when we're thinking about how society is changing, often it's used, how a group gets together and they transform and turn into something more beautiful. But what we often don't talk about is what is actually happening in that chrysalis. What happens in that time of change and transition? Well, actually, inside that chrysalis, that caterpillar has turned to mush. And the cells have died from one. But there's a new breed of cell that emerges, the imaginal cells that have the imagining, the information and the patterning of a new way of being, the butterfly. So what are our imaginal cells? These cells are latent until it's time for them to grow. We have latent cells of imagining of a better way forward. Indigenous communities lived this way. Traditional societies in many different parts. Without romanticizing them, what is that deep knowledge and knowing that we can bring forth at this time to be able to create a positive revolution that is grounded deeply on our understanding of planetary systems, of how we need to be in connection with nature and each other to be able to live well. So the question I'd like to pose in the context of what now and creating a positive revolution is, what is essential? because we've had time to really focus in on this question about what is the most important, what is the essence of what it is we need to live well. And we've had the time because of being in isolation. And I wonder what you've been thinking. I wonder what you're thinking about, things that you're willing to let go of now that you're finding no longer necessary or important. And also to think about what are some of the things that maybe we're missing that we'd let go of, that we'd like to bring back into our lives. And of course, in the context of what I was speaking about before with the growing humanitarian crisis, we need food. We need access to local food everywhere. And we also know that community is important and a sense of care and the possibilities for resilience. We need kitchen gardens everywhere. The co-founder of Permaculture, Bill Mollison, talked about it being a practical philosophy and it focusing us on what we can do rather than what we want others to change. How can we create billions of practical positive steps around the world that can help to build the resilient and robustness for communities, for families, but also to regenerate and restore the natural ecological systems on which we all depend. So the essential things are about restoring and repairing the planetary systems, the ecological systems, and to be creating the safe, healthy human habitats that then we can begin to thrive, and not just in wealthy countries, but everywhere. So kitchen gardens everywhere seems to be the response that I'm hearing from people, whether they're living in refugee camps or they're living in downtown New York. I heard someone saying the other day that we really have only run the first mile of a marathon, that we're nowhere near out of the woods yet. And I saw this little picture too, and I think it really brings it into perspective that while we're in this enormous catastrophe of COVID, there are other things that are looming which are also massive crises. And all of these things are connected. And so what we need to be doing is really to be creating environments in which we can not just survive, but we can thrive. And what are those basic things that we need in order to enable us to feel that we can meet our basic needs, that we have enough to be able to share in mutual aid with other people, and to feel a sense of safety for our family and for ourselves. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was really about how we need an edible garden revival at a scale we've not seen since, say, the wartime, when there was the massive Dig for Victory movement. Now, across the world, there were these movements back at home while the war was taking place out in the world. In the United States, there was something like 20 million gardeners who produced 40% of the fresh fruit and vegetables. And in Britain, the gardens that were full of food were a symbol of British resilience and were growing half of the food needs. So how can we, in the face of climate change, and also in particular COVID-19 right now, reinvigorate this idea of edible gardens everywhere? What does our home look like? What does our garden look like? What do our neighbourhoods look like and our parks look like when we reimagine them in this way? So in your own home, think about how you can create your landscape that surrounds you, whether you're in an urban area, you have a little bit more space, that the plants that you're incorporating are edible or medicinal or in some way part of the function of that they're part of the composting or the habitat, and that we're reorienting our thinking about what is beautiful and create enormous edible landscapes everywhere so that there's much more food and that there's a level of abundance so that we're not dependent and reliant on systems that are quite fragile at this time. And so your garden may well be a balcony garden. It could be like this gentleman here, making use of every single space that he has in his little courtyard. Perhaps your garden is in the street, on a verge, down at the local park, in an allotment, or part of a community garden. It could be on a rooftop. It could be in a school. Where are there places that you can get involved in to actually start getting those gardens happening? Now, maybe you've already got some gardens going, because I know there's been an incredible surge already of edible gardens. I wonder how you're going. And I know many of you who are listening probably already have your gardens. How possibly could you ripple them out or help other people to get gardens going? Maybe you're just starting out and you are really looking for some extra help. Maybe reach out to other people that you can see up and down the street who do have their gardens going and ask for help. I think this time we really need to be looking at how we can cultivate this sense of mutual aid, of working together. And I know we need to socially distance, but that doesn't mean that we can't be supporting one another to be able to really ripple this out beautifully. And always take handfuls of seeds or cuttings if you're going somewhere, or a beautiful bouquet of edible plants. Often you could collect a bouquet of, say, kale and lemon myrtle, and there's this beautiful cranberry hibiscus and garlic chive flowers. Make up a bundle that you can take over to someone, or cuttings. So you're taking cuttings of plants to someone else. And always carry around a little envelope so you can be collecting seeds if you go to someone else's place too. Food gardens are essential, and particularly in places where communities are vulnerable. I've recently been working with the Women's Self-Help Group in Kakamega in western part of Kenya. This Women's Self-Help Group has identified that the kitchen garden idea had been lost from their communities, focusing particularly on maximising the use of their land for cash cropping, which has been promoted heavily by government programs, and particularly something called the 1 Acre Fund, which is driving small-scale farmers to use all of their land to grow 1 or 2 crops of hybrid seeds with chemicals. And so while this may maximise production of a type of crop, but it's also vulnerable, they're actually losing out massively because they don't have the food growing in their gardens that they can eat on a daily basis. So while they're waiting for their crop to grow, they're using last year's savings from that crop to buy their food. And there's really no there's no spare money available. And if that crop fails, or it's a bad year, or the droughts come, or the plague of locusts comes through, then they've got nothing for the next year. So if, however, there is this resilience in local food gardens, it actually makes an enormous difference. So one of the programs that we've been supporting is this women's self-help group. And the first thing that they decided to do was to get tools and seeds for getting gardens happening in and around their homes. And so there's a group of women who go out and teach the next village about the importance of doing this. And then they go into the next village. And so it's rippling out. It's myceliating.
Shano shosi Kenya kunyakananga. Shano shosi Kenya kunyakananga. Corona no bulwale bunyasinja iwe. Corona no bulwale bunyasinja. Corona no bulwale bunyasinja. Shano shosi Kenya kunyakananga. Shano shosi Kenya kunyakananga.
So in order to support this, we also need a community food revolution, because we won't be able to grow enough food in our backyards to support us. We will need other food. And where is this going to be coming from? Before we actually think of what food we can get from outside, I also do encourage us to think about all the different ways that we can eat the foods that we have. So, for example, with the pumpkin, that we eat the pumpkin flesh, we eat the pumpkin seeds, we eat the pumpkin skins, we eat the pumpkin leaves and the shoots and the flowers, and that all of the plants that we have, we actually eat much more of each of the plants. But so where can we then think of the next layer of our food system and the resilience of these localized systems? Well, we can explore our commons. And this particular landscape in and around a development called Village Homes in California, I think, is a really remarkable idea. And I am always surprised that this has not been rippled out across the planet. Just imagine if all of the suburban developments that had happened in the last 30 years since this place was established incorporated throughout them edible landscaping at the core, what a different world we would have now. So let me just tell you a little bit about what happens at Village Homes. So the street trees, for example, almonds, they get 7 tons of almonds from the street trees every year. And so that gets sold amongst the community and also sold beyond the community, and the money that they generate from that goes back into maintaining the edible landscape. There are fruit trees all over the development, and there's these avenues of allotment gardens too, so and not tucked away round the back. This is actually the main avenue through the middle of the development. The cars have been kept on the outside, which means that there's much more public space available for actually using that land for growing food. And so if this is the main bike path or the walkway, you can see that the food is right there. It's visible. It's kind of like in your face, and it means that your food system is visible and important. And so I think this use of the commons in and around our cities and towns is an incredibly important place to be growing food and to be growing really visible, and actually to weave it into the design of our developments. I would love to see that any new development is required to actually incorporate significant areas of edible landscaping. This development, Village Homes in California, has 40% of its landscape, of its open space, as edible landscape. And that's substantial. And they also, other things that they do are they slow down and sink the water into the landscape to renew the water table, and also considering that this is an arid area, it's a remarkably vibrant set of gardens that they have there because of the way that they manage water and also return the nutrients from the development back into the soil as well. So you're creating this metabolic system within the urban environment. And so doing community collaboration too within that, and community supported systems. So some things that you might think about would be, for example, here on with the chickens. So instead of each household having their own backyard chickens, perhaps there's a cooperative chicken system where there may be a dozen families who work together to look after a flock of chickens. This is in Denmark, in a Horsøy eco-village in Denmark. So each family, it's their turn once every fortnight or so to go and look after the chickens. And they collect the eggs. And then for the rest of the fortnight, someone else has a turn at doing that. So that gives you the freedom, I suppose, not to have that daily responsibility in, our urban busy lives, but it does give us the access to this fresh and healthy food, and that the chickens can be processing the food scraps from the village, and the manure from the chickens can be collected for the community gardens. And so you get this cycle and this collaboration. We have a system like that here where I live for milk. And so we have a collective dairy, which means that it's just a handful of families that look after these cows. And so it's once every week, it's our turn to go down and milk the cows and look after the cows. And we just bring the milk back, and we can make our own yogurt and cheese. And when you're working with your neighbours, there are systems like this on the bottom picture of creating urban agriculture zones. So the council actually designating areas where urban agriculture can happen. This is in Ljubljana in Slovenia, the capital of Slovenia, where just around the inner urban area there is this swathe of greenery. There's a river zone and then lots of natural tree areas for habitat and these allotments. And so it's a brilliant place of protecting the green lungs of the city, creating avenues for wildlife and also food right in the middle of the city. So we need to be creating places where people can garden together. And allotments have been a magnificent place where in this time of COVID-19, where people can actually still get out and about and be in social distancing, but in their own plot. And she was saying that her allotment garden was what kept her sane, because she was able to get out once a day and go and spend time down in her allotment. The allotments there are big enough so that there was the social distancing and it worked really well. It's space for these community food systems to happen, which is one of those community supported agriculture systems linking a number of farmers from around the southeast Queensland area and northern New South Wales directly with the consumers in and around Brisbane. Their consumer base has quadrupled in the last month or so. And so while other food systems are starting to look more fragile, this type of food system is actually looking really strong. So community-based systems, community food systems, local cooperatives, local community farms and community gardens where people can directly access food and where there's strong relationships. And I think this is actually the key, that they're localized, resilient systems that are based around relationships with community, relationships with farmers, relationships with the land and the seasons. And it's has inbuilt security and resilience. I also wanted to touch on the importance of kitchen gardens in refugee camps. I've recently been talking with a number of different groups in refugee camps, both in Kenya and Uganda, and meeting up with people online who have been working in this humanitarian world for a long time to explore what it is that is absolutely needed right now. And it comes back to kitchen gardens in all the conversations. So refugees are suffering disproportionately, and lockdown is devastating vulnerable communities. And not just refugees, but displaced peoples in all different contexts. The rations just simply don't go far enough. I've recently been talking with Sakina, a friend of ours from the Kakuma refugee camp in northwest Kenya. We met her in Uganda through the Ethos Foundation, sponsoring her to take a permaculture design certificate course in Uganda. And we've been meeting up with her recently via Zoom with a group of young teenagers to help start a Perma Youth club there. And we were asking the young people and Sakina what are some of the issues that they're facing there right now. And pretty much she was saying that the rations don't go far enough. So the recent set of food rations that were delivered for these refugees was they've decided to do it in a 2-month chunk so that people don't need to wait in line too much and be so close to each other, because they're in lockdown as well. And so 2 months of rations arrived and people waited hours and hours and hours for them. And when they got there, there was only 6 kilos of rice, a little bit of oil and sugar and some legumes, I think. Not a lot of food. Nowhere near enough for a family to survive on for 2 months. So there have been cuts to rations for, millions of people. And the World Food Program has actually announced that 30% of the relief is being reduced in lockdown, and there's going to be further of this to come because of the shortfall in in money, but also in price spikes and the difficulty in just simply getting food to these places. So the problem too with this is that type of food that's delivered as food aid, even though it's filling bellies, it's low quality food. It's often food that's come from GMO, chemical-based agriculture, industrial agriculture, and it's not got anything green or living in any of this food. So if people are to stay healthy and well and to have a strong immune system, and for the children who grow up there to be able to grow up healthy and strong and to be able to have not be malnourished so that they can actually think and learn as well, need to have healthy food. So Sakina, you can kind of see her in the back there. She's got the red scarf around her head. She started running this program called Permakids, and so she's been teaching well over 250 kids in the last little season about how to grow food. And now she's turning her attention to growing a Perma Youth Club. What Sakina has asked for, and the young people, is that through the education program of Perma Youth, they learn about permaculture kitchen gardening, and then they create a community garden in and around their community centre. And at the same time, they're taking back seeds and plants and their tools to create little gardens in and around their homes. Now, there is not much space around the shacks in which they live, but at least it's something. And so any food scraps or water that is tossed out of their house, instead of it creating a puddle somewhere or scraps of food on the ground, it can actually be turned into compost, and the water then can also be used to water the plants. And so it's actually helping to improve public health as well as health and nutrition. So the Perma Youth Clubs in refugee camps is myceliating. It's just rippling out in an amazing way, and the calls for help to get these started are coming regularly. And I'd really love it if anyone's interested in working with me to help make this happen. We could definitely do with some help. So this is Ben Ricky, the gentleman standing up here, and he's currently one of the people who's receiving a scholarship to attend the Permaculture Educators Program. He started only just a few weeks ago, and he's racing through the program. He's actually a trained teacher, so he's absorbing everything he can from the permaculture program and then teaching directly to his group of young girls and boys who also would like to be permaculture teachers. And their plan is to start a school, a permaculture school there that can then start to teach all the other thousands of children in this refugee camp. So they've already started doing designs and bag gardens, and they're getting their mulching systems happening. We've been talking about soils. They're starting to build some gardens, so they're trying to raise up some beds using as much space as possible so that they can actually have the actual mycelium network forming. They're gathering up manures and compost materials. They're looking for perennial plants and seeds. And so this is the idea of actually creating the community gardens in and around their school, as well as getting tiny gardens in around their house. And as I said before, finding ways to redirect and reuse water however they possibly can, because it's a long way to go and get water. One of the things we'll be doing in the next little while is sending over some more tools, so resources for them to access more tools and seeds and a water tank, and also educational resources to help with them learning and teaching permaculture elsewhere. So what's really being focused on is trying to find ways to tweak the system a bit, so to make sure that any food waste and scraps go straight into the soil. Any animal manures also do the same. Any water that is being used for washing or cooking gets put back into the gardens. That not only are there fast-growing plants to get immediate food happening, but there's a lot of perennials that are being grown as well. So one of the problems is in places like this is that food gets grown and harvested so quickly that there's never a chance for it to go to seed, to collect seed. So we're also looking at ways to support the development of seed gardens, because for one little can of seeds that are sold there, it's really expensive, and these seeds too are hybrid seeds, so they really can't be saved year after year. So they're stuck in this loop of having to buy. So an important part of the Perma Youth and also these gardens in refugee camps is this concept of building soil and getting your own seeds and really helping to build up perennial food forest systems and small-scale micro gardens in and around people's homes. And every day I've been spending time talking with different groups of people, trying to work out what is actually the best way to move forward with this. And I had a fantastic conversation with Rosemary Morrow, a permaculture elder who's been working with displaced people for a long time now. And she was saying that there's absolute essential importance of people learning permaculture design right now in refugee camps and in camps or everywhere. Not just gardening, but actual permaculture design, because what it does is it gives people the chance to create real food security now and have access to real food too, not just the ration food. So for the camps that people are in right now, it enables them to do that. And now these camps, some of them are short-term temporary camps where people are only for a few months. But Bemariki, who I showed you a picture of before, he's been in a number of different camps, but he's been a refugee for 13 years. Sakina, she's been a refugee for 11 years now. So, really it's not just the fast food growing, it actually is the possibility of growing substantial food forest systems that are resilient and really help people to completely supplement and expand the repertoire of food from the rations. So that's number one, that's real food and it's real security. The second one is that if and when those people find their way to a new place, to a new country, to a safe haven somewhere else, then they have the design skills and the resilient skills to be able to set themselves up in a new place. If you just teach a garden technique for one particular place, that doesn't really transfer quite as well as if you have that ability to be able to observe and design and connect systems up and to create really strong resilience and robustness in design. So that was the second point that Rosemary Morrow made. And the third point was that if perchance they are able to go back home to places that have been destroyed by conflict or by some kind of natural disaster, that they actually have the design skills to be able to redesign those systems better than what they were before. And I think this is a really important point, why permaculture is so important. And so in places like that, it's not possible for people to pay for learning permaculture. So what we're really looking forward to doing is to be training the trainers, teaching teachers. So through the Ethos Foundation and the Permaculture Education Institute, we're offering scholarships to anyone in these refugee camps who would like to learn and supporting them to then teach other people so that the permaculture continues to myceliate. I'm going to keep using that word. I love it so much. So this will continue to ripple out, and teaching teachers is by far the best way to make this stronger and to support more people, because there's no point in us here trying to teach permaculture over there because the context is completely different. we can help to share as many different ideas and to mentor people through the process. But really the teachers that need to be there are the people who live in that place and understand it deeply. So my key goal is to support as many possible new permaculture teachers everywhere around the world to be able to teach in their own communities and context. And that is adults and youth as well. So the fourth topic that I wanted to touch on today is that of supporting young people to be really active. And so we call this practivism. So it's a type of everyday activism that's very practical, and it helps young people to really face the anxiety they have about the future in a very positive way. Think about how we can positively support young people to live the change they want to see in the world. And the best place to do that is starting at home, in the garden, in the local community, and reaching out across the planet to connect with other young people who are going through a similar thing. So we've created the Global Perma Youth, and this is kind of the seed group of that, based here in our garden. So it's young children from southeast Queensland who came together in this group and then decided that they wanted to reach out across the world and meet other young people who were also doing this and thinking about it. So there are now people in the Philippines, in Thailand and Zanzibar and Germany and England and Norway. It's a little bit hard to get across to the Americas because of the time zones, but presently there is this connection that spans across so many different countries, and every week these young people come together and do collaborative projects. They write together, they're researching plants together, they're exploring the principles and the ethics of permaculture. They go out and look at their own gardens and design a system in their garden, and then send back photos or films about those. And so it's this generative learning process that these young people are actually coming up with the ideas of what they want to do and following them through with some mentoring. And so what they're asking for right now is to have a range of different people who will come in and work with them to answer questions. And they're also looking to start up their own podcast as well. They've already started up their YouTube channel. And so this idea of young people teaching other young people, I think, is absolutely magnificent. And one of the key things I've seen is being so positive with this is the rippling out for the perma youth that's now happening in these refugee camps has come from these young people reaching out. And so every week too, they meet with the refugee kids, and there's an exchange between, what they're learning over there and what they're learning here. And while it's sometimes difficult to hear, we do get the photographs and we get to see little snippets of what's happening. And I think the most important part of that is that there's an understanding that there is a global predicament of a challenge at this time, and that everyone everywhere is really trying to find a way forward. And for young people, this is really heartening. And it helps them to make sense of what's going on in the world. Permaculture helps them to start to think bigger, to think in systems, and to generate a much deeper level of eco-literacy, which then gives them the capacity to be able to design ecological systems that work with nature, and to become quite agile in their problem-solving skills. And not only that, permaculture is giving young people the chance to build very basic skills of resilience. And these things are going to set them in good stead. All of these things, the systems thinking, the sense making, the communication, eco-literacy, all of these things are going to be helping these young people as they move into this uncertain future. And it's helping also to develop a much greater awareness of what needs to happen at a local scale and a global scale. So it's local and global action, local and global awareness, and local and global collaborations. And this together is helping to support the mental health of these young people, the sense of meaning and purpose in the projects that they do, and the relevance to what's happening in the world. I've heard a lot of them talking about how they find some of the projects that they're having to do in school just irrelevant, that it's completely ignoring what's happening in the world with COVID, with the economic situation, and with climate change. And that by coming together through these Perma Youth Clubs, that they're actually finding that sense of meaning and purpose, and that they're feeling that they're able to make a contribution and not just waiting until they've finished school and finished university and then being able to make a difference, that they actually have a chance to be part of the positive change. And so someone described this to me the other day too, and I thought it was a really good way of thinking about it, is that it's helping to move them from a sense of thinking about me, thinking just about themselves, to thinking about the we, how they can work together in their group. But not just that, it's how their group can then relate to other youth groups or other groups that are also working towards this positive change. And that moves us to the us. And so it is this group it's being part of a growing movement, the revolution, the regenerative cultural evolution. So in response to the question about what now, I think one of the key things that we really do need is to deepen our understanding of permaculture, to become better designers, to become better gardeners, to become better observers, better listeners, and to be better sharers and communicators about permaculture, to support the establishment of community gardens everywhere and food gardens everywhere. So that is gardens in our own place, gardens out on the street, gardens in our community, gardens at our workplaces, at our schools, that wherever there is a space or a possibility of starting up a food garden, that we take that opportunity, and that wherever we can, we support refugees and displaced peoples and vulnerable communities to also start gardens. So if we're in a situation that we have the capacity to do this, that we also make caring for other communities in other parts of the world a priority for us too. And as much as possible to mentor young people in a positive way and to share with them the valuable skills that they need, and that everything is about actually taking a step to act. And this is part of that revolution that we need, the edible garden revolution, that is about creating regenerative cultures and to live now as we think humans should and could live. I wanted to let you know that I have a 4-part permaculture series which explains a little bit more about what permaculture is, and you can see the link here. So I talk about what is permaculture and how you can weave it into your life and your livelihood, and really about how you can actually become a teacher in permaculture and contribute to this positive change. So I encourage you to have a look at that if you've not already. And also to share it with other people who, may not know what permaculture is about and want to understand a little bit more about how it can be useful. If you're looking for more information about how to actually get your garden started, I recommend you start at this point. This is the online permaculture gardening course that I've created that really dives into the absolute basics of what you need to get a thriving garden happening. So starting with the soil, how to set your garden up, how to plan for growing abundant food, setting up a food forest perennial system, and growing some really super nutrient dense foods, getting your medicinal garden started, looking at what kind of plants you can use for your face and your hair and your body, to help you become sort of more waste free and go more and to detox as well. Looking at how you can grow all different sorts of teas in your garden, and some really interesting ways of preparing some of maybe unusual food. So you can see the link here too. So ourpermaculturelife.com, The Incredible Edible Garden, and that's a self-paced course. The other online course I have available is the Permaculture Educators Program, which weaves together 2 permaculture certificates, a permaculture design certificate and a permaculture teacher certificate. Because as I said before, I think one of the key things that is essential for rippling out permaculture in a really positive way to make a difference in this world is actually helping people to become teachers so that they can take it to their communities and then help to ripple it out even further. So this course, the 2 certificates are woven together. So as you're learning the permaculture design certificate, you're also learning about how you could possibly teach it. And then in the teacher certificate, we look at different sorts of methodologies of teaching in different contexts, so that when you've finished, you feel confident that you are able to take your permaculture teaching into the world, because by that time you've already done designs, you've already started teaching, and we support you to begin your permaculture education career. Really, part of this is also business modules and how to set up this to be your livelihood, because in order to support people to become teachers, to set up gardens everywhere and permaculture systems, it needs to go beyond just being a hobby. As wonderful as that is, I really believe that we need to have as many professional permaculture designers and teachers out there in the world, either doing independent permaculture work or weaving it into their current work, whether they're designers or practitioners in all different ways. So check out this course at permacultureeducationinstitute.org. You can start anytime and take as long as you need. There's no expiry date and there's no deadlines for your assessments. Whenever you've sent in the assessments, there's 6 assessments, 3 for each certificate. Whenever you've sent those in and they've been approved, then you're good to go with your certificates. And we have a lot of contact throughout the time, and we encourage everyone to be active locally in their own community. So a lot of people have been telling us that, they'd never actually connected so much with their community before until they'd started doing this course. They started finding out where all the interesting organisations were and where all the different places where you could connect in with local food systems and where you can access resources that you need for creating permaculture systems, and getting to know neighbours as well, and starting to create mutual aid systems, or even just sharing seeds or compost scraps, resources, all different kinds of things. So it's wonderful to hear how people are utilising this course to make a difference in their community already. And so if you'd like to find out more about that, take a look at the website, and I also welcome inquiries directly to me. So you just put Morag in front of that. So Morag at permacultureeducationinstitute.org. And I did want to let you know too about my YouTube channel. So I have well over 150 films on there now. Actually, I've lost count, to be honest. The last series of films, as I mentioned earlier, there are 55 films that I put up in the last 2 months about how you can actually grow an abundance of food in your garden. Little 5-minute films. So it was from my Live at 5 series, where every day I was getting on talking about a different plant, and so each day we'd dive into one particular plant, looking at how to grow it, all the different ways you could use it and eat it, how to propagate it and share it and store it and cook it. So I hope you enjoy that series. And there's also interviews and tours to different gardens, and how-tos on how to set up gardens and worm towers and all different sorts of things in there. So check out youtube.com, and then my YouTube channel is Morag Gamble, Our Permaculture Life. You might also be interested in checking out my blog, which is ourpermaculturelife.com, and here you'll also find lots and lots of articles, recipes and how-tos, and all the films too I also put up here on the blog. So you can subscribe to my blog. There's a little button up the top there in the menu. You can see subscribe, and if you click on that, you'll join my newsletter, and I put out a monthly newsletter which has lots of new information, all the new films, any new events that are coming up, references, and so it's a good way to keep in touch with what's going on. And I also let people know about these masterclasses through that too. And as you can see on the side here too, I put together a COVID-19 resilience care pack, and what that essentially is a collection of what I think are some of the best films and the best blogs that can help you to create a garden rapidly. So if you just click on that in the blog, you'll access that set of materials, and it might save you from sort of diving too far and getting lost in 400 articles and 150 films. So start there with the COVID-19 Resilience Care Pack. And I'd also like to welcome you to support our permaculture charity, and thank you to everyone who has so far supported the women's group and the emergency relief for the community, the permaculture community that was being flooded. Our current focus right now, as I've been talking about, is creating kitchen garden kits for women's groups and also for the refugee youth. And so we're currently got a number of different communities waiting for resources to get tools and watering cans, seeds, maybe a water tank, and also a set of posters that will help them to teach other people about what they're doing too. So if you're able to donate, that would be absolutely wonderful. If you go to ethosfoundation.org.au, I wanted to let you know too that all the donations go directly to these local communities. We don't take any fees out here. I actually personally cover all of the fees from this end. The only bit that gets taken out is the bank fees of transferring. So you know that when you donate, it's going to go directly to these communities. And I only donate to communities that we have a direct relationship with, and we know that the people we're sending the money to will be distributing it out into the community. So essentially, each of these garden kits, we're hoping to kit up each child and each of the women in the women's self-help group with their own set of tools and seeds and resources, as well as some common resources. So what it works out to be is around about $30 per person. So please, if you're able to donate to cover one person's kit or even a number of kits, that would be absolutely wonderful. And thank you in advance for supporting the Ethos Foundation and supporting the rippling out of kitchen gardens in these places. Now, I did mention right at the start that I am doing a gardening course tomorrow, and this will be run live stream via the Brisbane City Council, and I've put up the Zoom link here, so 863-901-5992, and it's going to be run from 2 o'clock to 3:30 Eastern Standard Time in Australia. If you'd like to join, it's going to be a very practical permaculture gardening talk, and it'll be done via Zoom, which means that you can hop on and ask me lots of questions as well and meet other people who are in and around the Southeast Queensland area. So I encourage you to do that, and I hopefully will have a recording of that too that I might be able to share if you're in a time zone that that doesn't work with. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to get that out to you in the next few days as well. And also I wanted to say, if you've got young people between the ages of, say, typically around 11 to 16 who would be interested in joining this global perma-youth group, then that meets every Sunday afternoon, or even just to sign up and get their newsletter, because their newsletter, which is put together by a 13-year-old member of this group, is comprehensive. They put out so much different information that is really wonderful. So if you're still in lockdown and you're looking for something really useful for your young people to read, then check out what they're doing. I'm really so proud of them all. I think it's wonderful. And I also get on to that call every Sunday with them to mentor and support them in the work that they're doing. So if you'd like your children or grandchildren or friends to join this, then please get in touch. Actually, either through my normal email, but you can send it directly to them as well at permacultureyouth@gmail.com. So thanks so much for attending. It's been wonderful to have your company here today. The next masterclass is going to be on June 22nd, again at the same time. If you have a topic that you would like me to explore or a question you'd like me to explore, please send it in. I have a few topics in waiting in line, but depending on what you send through, I can rearrange those. So every month there'll be another masterclass, and I look forward to seeing you there too. I'm going to be sticking around here for a little bit longer. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I'm going to scour back through now to see if there's other ones that I've missed while I've been talking to you now. So stick around if you have a question and you'd like to chat, and also if you've got any other resources that you think are really useful in relation to what we've been talking about, feel free also to stick those in the chat as well. Now, the recording of this will be available soon after this is finished. So if you would like to share it with other people too, I encourage you to do that. So thanks again for turning up today. And I really do encourage you to go out and see if you can find a way to ripple out those kitchen gardens in your home, in your community, and to support the young people and vulnerable communities to really get kitchen gardens happening everywhere. It's an essential thing that we all need to be doing for so many different reasons. So thanks a lot. I'll see you next time. Bye.
The Permaculture, and we save the planet. We are the Permaculture, and we grow together. We are the Permaculture. Can't you hear our voices? We are the Permaculture.
Planet. With coal mines and landfill, let's stop this habit. There's fire, sickness and pollution. Money and greed are not the solution. The Amazon's on fire, Australian soils are dying. Arctic ice caps are melting, what's with all the lying?